are ready to get started at exactly 3 o'clock SFT, that's standard faculty time. Thank you everybody for showing up today and taking time out of your busy schedules. We've got, my goal was to not have any business on today so we could do elections and awards. I came close. Got a little bit of business to do. We're going to be doing we're going to be listening to the academic continuity report with if there's no objections, that we'll move it from the report sessions up to the head of the meeting. Are there any objections to that? Okay. And then we've got a little addendum to the spring curriculum report that didn't make it in and needs to be done before 2016. It's been up for 24 hours. We sent out a notice, so I'm sorry for the short notice, but hopefully we'll see how that goes. And then, if you recall, when we passed the motion to allow for substitute senators, we put a sunset clause in it, and that we would revisit it at the end of the year to see if we think it worked or not, and whether we're going to reinstate it or not as a permanent provision to the bylaws. So we need to do that. Then we're going to have announcement and confirmation of the committee appointments and results, elections and elected and appointed committees. And then we'll have the election of Senate President-elect and Vice President. We have 2 fine candidates. And then our President, Michael Schill, has a few year-end remarks for us. Then we're going to be rolling into the 4 Senate awards. Pass the gavel, then eat and drink. And be merry. I'll be merry. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes from the last meeting? Seeing none, they stand approved. We now are going to have a report on academic continuity. Do we have somebody to give that for us? Francis, would you like to come up to the front to do that? Francis, you're just like on every committee, it seems like. Yeah, right?
Small people problems. This is the report that began a long time ago. It started as the Academic Integrity Task Force report. The Academic Integrity Task Force was formed by the Senate in response to questions of activities that were going on during the GTFF strike and how academic continuity was being handled in terms of classes and giving grades during the strike. The task force was myself, Ron Bramhall, and Joe Lowndes. That at the time I was the chair of the UOCC, which I still am. Joe was the chair of grad council, and Ron was the chair of undergrad council. We met with a lot of people, talked through many of the questions that were coming up, especially the question of putting a grade on a class that was not finished or the work hadn't been completed, and all the various options that were possible. Many of the debates you may remember are things like giving a temporary grade that could be corrected, or giving an X grade if no grade was available, or giving a final grade and then leaving it open for changing, and then who should be doing those grades in the conditions of instructors of record who were not comfortable grading during the strike, or that there were contingencies that were going on that were making it very impossible to complete work. For example, if someone was appointed instructor of a very large class that required a lot of grading, so it wouldn't have been possible to do it in the timeline. And also many other implications, including financial aid implications, and sort of went on and on. Many of these are described in the various appendices to this report. This report then went on to Academic Council, which then, following the GTFF strike, was reconstituted and took on the task from the Academic Integrity Task Force of talking through and meeting with various groups, registrar, risk management, and so on, working through the various possibilities, and coming to the point of basically working out the best way to move in an emergency. And the agreed upon solution is that during an emergency that has academic consequence is that the Academic Council is the first point to be consulted, where the faculty can be involved in trying to react in a very swift fashion. So the Academic Council is the chairs of the major academic committees, the Committee on Courses, Academic Undergrad Council, Grad Council, SRC, ARC, and so on. It's a relatively small committee. It meets with administrators, and it can respond in a very rapid fashion. So this basically, it was reconstituted. We then started on trying to work through what should happen in different types of emergencies. And this became very, very complicated. And it is going to be our ongoing task, that is the ongoing task of Academic Council, of which I am co-chair currently. Because it becomes very complicated with timing, whether an emergency is a federal emergency or a non-federal emergency, how it impacts student aid, what time of the year are we in. We ended up very quickly becoming into a morass of trying to work out what would happen under different circumstances. With Academic Council being reformed, Academic Council then also received a lot of other issues that were being bogged down in the Senate committees and having problems moving through the Senate. So Academic Council, part of its role is also to bring these issues to the Senate, which we have been doing. That's why you've been seeing me a lot. So with these two things together has meant that this report has been delayed. We also talked to all the various constituencies that were involved in this, the discussions in the original task force report, plus all the people that are mentioned and are potentially impacted by this report. So it's been passed by them, but this is the this is the original task force committee as then edited somewhat by Academic Council. So it's the council's report. We've had some requests from the various constituents, especially from the Dean's Group, to be more explicit about what is an emergency and what happens to academic continuity in those emergencies. And rather than try to keep editing this to put that in, we decided we'd leave it with our vague term and look at that as moving ahead on our agenda for what we need to do, basically dealing with what are the different types of major crises and what is at least a game plan for how things should proceed under different circumstances. So as a report, it's fairly comprehensive. It's basically a report, so here, have a report. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Posted on the Senate website? Well, first of all, let's express our appreciation to Francis, the Academic Council, and the members of the task force for their hard work. And the report is posted online. Everybody's welcome to see it. And Francis summed up some of the major recommendations for it, the recommendations at the bottom. And then it is up to the academic leadership of the university and the Senate leadership to decide how we will enshrine this in policy, or how we will enact these recommendations, and if and how we'll enact these recommendations. So thanks, that's great. That's there for you to see. The second order of business is an addendum to the spring 2016 curriculum report. There were some minor changes in the MA-MS program in folklore that didn't make it, and they've been up there. So the motion coming out of graduate committee? No. Curriculum committee. Yeah. So coming out of committee is, Francis, would you like to move this?
So moved.
Thank you. Coming out of committee, it needs no second. Section 1.1, whereas the UO Committee on Courses, College of Arts and Sciences, and Graduate Council, I guess it is Committee on Courses, recently approved minor changes to the MA-MS program in folklore. Section 2.1, be it hereby moved, the University Senate approves the following addendum to the spring 2016 curriculum report. College of Arts and Sciences, new item. The Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, with the approval of the Graduate Council and with the endorsement of the Dean of the Graduate School, has approved changes to the degree requirements for the Master of Arts and Master of Science in Folklore, Public Folklore track. Changes include removing courses from requirements that are no longer being taught. That's a good thing. Reducing the number of required courses to increase flexibility for students, and reducing internship requirement to 4 credits, effective fall 2016. And the sponsor, rolling down, Senate Executive Committee, to get it up there, and the UO Committee on Courses. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All against, nay. The motion passes. The third order of business for today is to promote representative attendance at Senate meetings. This is returning business. As I said, we put in a sunset clause to bring this back to us at the end of this year to see if it worked. It is already by law. Would you guys want me to read this again? I can. Okay. Since it's returning business, it's already been read into the record. So basically what we need to do is to determine whether we should like to continue the substitute senator program as it has been going for most of the year, or to let this sunset. I'm going to start discussion. Is there any discussion against extending this, which would be simply amending it to remove the sunset clause so that it passes into the bylaws as a permanent item? Okay, I'm assuming from your silence that people like this. Let me see a nod of heads. Do you like the substitute senator? Yeah, I think it's been functioning well too. So the actual motion is a motion to amend this to remove the sunset clause. Can you show us the sunset clause down at the bottom? So basically to amend this to remove 2.3 so that it remains in the bylaws. Senator Copeman.
Which was actually relevant in our last meeting. The motion does not stipulate how far in advance of the meeting a substitute can be arranged for. And for instance, the students were wondering if they could have a sub on the spot. I don't know if we need to address that. It's technically not ruled out, so...
Well, can we roll up to the notification where the clause where you notify? As far in advance of the meeting as is practical. I think it could be up to the time the gavel falls is my ruling on that. But that, okay. That would be my ruling on that. If the, I think the Senate Executive Coordinator, somebody came up at the last minute, might ask the President to make a ruling whether that was as close as is practical. But I'm sure the goal is to have as good of representation as possible. I think just folks can make a ruling on that on the spot. My hunch is it will be difficult to construe this to mean after the gavel has fallen, which I saw some of that going on in the last meeting, and that would have been an interesting situation. Okay. Does that help? That's my opinion on it. Okay. All in favor of the amendment to the bylaws? This requires a 2/3 to pass. Let's try a voice vote first. If that's unclear, I'll go back to a placards vote. Yes.
I just want to make sure I understand.
Okay.
If I'm voting yay right now, I'm voting to amend this. Excuse me. If I vote yay now, I'm voting to remove the sunset clause.
Yes.
Okay.
Which makes this a permanent part of the bylaws.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Senator McGee.
I think it's in 2.2.4 or something. It talks about notifying the executive coordinator of the statutory faculty. Is that actually your title, Bettina? Is it the statutory faculty or the university senate?
And both.
Okay.
Yeah, they could theoretically be separated, but we've never done that. If they get separated, we may have to revisit that, but that may be appropriate, seeing as it's the qualification to participate in the Senate. Well, it worked for a year. I see your point. That may need to be revisited. But I don't think it's a no-brainer that it should be the Senate either. There's an argument to be made that it could be statutory faculty. Any other questions? All in favor of amending to remove the sunset clause, say aye. Aye. All against? The motion passes. We next come to the announcement and confirmation of spring 2016 committee appointments. Vice President Harbaugh, as chair of the Committee on Committees, are you going to do this? Oh, okay. Do you have a graphic that can show us this? It's a big, long list. Okay, we got a big, long list of people, which is a good thing.
Yeah, so as Senate VP, I can say that it's a long list. We went through a long process to try to recruit people for all these committees. In the end, I think we filled almost all the slots. You may look at this list and decide that actually you're on too many committees or the wrong committees. And in that case, please let me know right away, and I will do what I can do to fix that. Okay. So I think what I'm saying then is that this is still in negotiation. Okay. So you're not committing to a year of service on these committees at this point.
Why are you letting him off the hook, Bill?
But don't quote me on that.
Can we get a movie scroll on this? You know, like a movie title scroll? So we can just see the big long list and see how many of these people are in committees. We got time. We need some theme music. Go slowly. The post-credit Easter egg, yes. Okay. So part of my duties as president of the Senate has been to attend the Interinstitutional Faculty Senate, where I get to talk to our colleagues throughout the public universities in the state who also deal with faculty and shared governance at the state public institutions, universities. And I can assure you that getting people to serve is not an easy thing to do, nor is it an easy thing to serve at university-wide service. It is frequently done, the main motivation I've seen for people doing it is simply they see a job that needs to be done in service to their university, and out of a sense of service to their university, they donate their time to doing it. We all get paid for service, both in our discipline and in our college and department and in the university. However, sometimes the university service may not get us quite, how can I say this, is not counted for so much sometimes in our evaluations, and something we have an ongoing conversation about. Which, and I don't mean to open that as a negotiating point or anything at this time, but just simply as a point of emphasizing, as a way of emphasizing the commitment to service of all these people we've seen that just scrolled past us. Let's give a round of applause for everybody in the university service. And I had the pleasure of working with many of these folks throughout my 2 years here, and it's been great. So, all in favor of confirming the spring 2016 committee appointments and elected positions, appointments, please say aye. Aye. All against? They are confirmed. Next up is the election of Senate President-elect and Vice President. That is a shared position. When you were elected as Vice President for the University Senate, you are in line of succession for the presidency the next year. And we have two outstanding candidates, Chris Sinclair and Rich Marjoram. The way this goes is one of them will speak. Neither expressed a preference, so I'm going to toss a coin to see who goes first. They'll take about 5 minutes. You're welcome to read through your statement. Their statements have been posted on the Senate website for some time, or to make any of the anything way you want to address the Senate for about 5 minutes. Then there will be another short session of 5 minutes or so for folks that want to address questions to that particular candidate. Then the other candidate will speak, and again, 5 minutes for senators to address questions to that particular candidate. And I would like to restrict the questions to senators. And then when the second candidate's question and answer session is finished, we'll open it up to a question and answer session for questions that you'd like to direct to both candidates. So during those initial ones, try to keep the questions, if you have them, for that particular candidate. If you have one for both candidates, please wait until after each has a question and answer session. We'll have a shared question and answer session where they can each take turns at it. So with that in mind, Chris's heads, Rich's tails. Heads. Chris, you go first.
Well, thank you. I don't really have anything prepared, so I'm just going to play this off the cuff a little bit. I've kind of determined that this whole thing was a clever ploy to try to get me to cut my hair and trim my beard. Believe it or not, this is trimmed. All right, so I have participated in the Senate for a number of years. The last few years I have not, but not for lack of running. But my reasoning for wanting to become Senate VP and eventual president is not because I want the job per se, but because I think it's an important job. And I think it's important that it's done seriously, taken seriously, and done in such a way that it preserves the power that we as the faculty have. This being said, I think the Senate works best when we can identify things that we have in common with the administration, and we work with the administration on these things. So what I'm kind of proposing in some sense, and these are all very soft proposals, especially since I would be vice president next year, and it wouldn't be for another year until I was president, were I elected. But I would like to partnership with the administration so that they present ideas of what they think is important academic matters that should be considered in front of the Senate. right? So we can have some sort of collaboration, some sort of cooperation on matters that we can agree with, and then work as a team to push these through the Senate. Now, that's not to say that we're necessarily going to agree on everything. That is not the nature of the Senate administrative relationship, nor should it be. I think that we should push back hard when the administration tries to rob power from the Senate. I think we should push back hard when the administration does something that we as the faculty or the university community see as being immoral or amoral. Right? I think that we should be a voice of reason. We should be the voice of the ethical body of the university. And so I think that there is a relationship where we can collaborate on some things, but then remain distant on other things as well. I've talked with President Schill about some of this. I've talked with Provost Coltrane about some of this. I think that there should be no issue in having a good relationship with both of them. I look forward to it, assuming I get elected. So I want to talk just about a few things that I think are important. Again, you know, being president is still a year off. A lot can change between now and then. I think one thing that Randy has worked very hard on, and that needs to continue, is kind of transitioning a lot of the policies that came to us from OUS. And need to be revamped in some ways. For some of these policies, it's just changing OUS to U of O and the Board of Trustees. Some of this is easy work. Some of it is more complicated. Some of it clearly is irrelevant, and there is a lot of it. So this work has started. This work needs to continue. I would also like, in some sense, to see the way the meetings are run. I would, in some sense, and again, this is a very loose proposal, is I would like to somehow separate the time that we use for resolutions. These are kind of emotional things where we want to inform the community as to things that we see are issues. I think we should remove kind of these emotional things from discussions where we're talking about legislation and policy. Things where, in a sense, logic should be the thing dictating our decisions, right? And that way we don't have instances where people get all worked up and all emotional, and then they turn around to a kind of something that needs to be decided by logic, and the logical part of the brain has shut off. This happens to me too. I want to continue to encourage service and Senate participation. Again, I think that Vice President Harbaugh has done an excellent job with the Committee on Committees, and I think that it's kind of an organizing challenge. It's a matter of going to people and asking them, will you do this? You would be good for this. Will you do this? But I think it's also a matter of coming up with some sort of structure within the administration to reward people who are doing this and who are doing it above and beyond what is expected, right? Something like that needs to happen, and that's something that I think we can work with the administration on in order to get some sort of, not necessarily compensation, but recognition for the people that are pulling the hardest. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about policy issues that I see as being important. I'm sure there's many more policy issues that are important. One is the notion of excellence and what are the metrics that we use to measure excellence. I think this is clearly an academic matter. It's something that the Senate should look into so that we know where these metrics are coming from, how we have decided on these metrics, and how they're going to be used. We've seen some of these metrics be used recently in CAS in order to justify certain changes in academic units, which clearly affect the academic running of those units, and so therefore should have been discussed by the Senate. That should have been under the purview of the Senate. And so I think one thing we need to look at is where these metrics come from. Are they applicable to our diverse community? Were they created by a diverse community? Right? Is this a bunch of people in the AAU saying we think these things are important, but it's just a bunch of white guys in a room deciding that these are the metrics? Right? We should know that, and we should discuss that, and we should decide what we think is excellence. Right? And not have that shoved upon us by somebody else. I think there's also some budget discussions that impact academic units. Anything thing in the budget that impacts an academic unit is by definition an academic matter, right? And therefore falls under the purview of the Senate, period, right? So let's work on that. Determination of new lines, new faculty lines, tenure lines, or the moving of lines within schools or between schools. We had a little bit of talk in the Senate budget meeting this morning about the potential for that, that some academic units could have the possibility, people retiring, not getting that line back in that academic unit, right? That certainly is not necessarily unreasonable, but it's a discussion that we should have as the academic body. And we should have that discussion in conjunction with the administration, of course, right? And finally, I think that there's some other academic academic issues. Policy on online and large classes, right? If we're going to have classes that either have students participating essentially off campus or participating in gigantic classrooms, these 500 people classes, I think there needs to be some sort of set of standards applied to these to make sure that they are rigorous academic courses that we, as the faculty, decide it's okay that we can put our stamp of approval on this. In particular, we need to get rid of situations where people are taking exams and final exams at home on the computer, right? This is a ridiculous situation. We need to have some way of making sure that the people who are enrolled in the class are actually the ones doing the work. I also think for some of these 500-person classes or some large classes beyond some certain cutoff, there needs to be some sort of standard as to, let's just say, how many A+ you can hand out, right? We need to decide that if we're going to teach classes like this, that there's some reasonable academic rigor that we're putting in. There's a lot of other issues. I've probably gone over my 5 minutes, so I will leave it right there.
Chris, you spoke a lot about this dialogue between faculty and the administration, but as you know, the university is made up of a diverse set of constituencies. So how would you go about ensuring that the different voices in the university senate are participating in these conversations that you're talking about?
This is a good question. Really, I would see my particular role as Senate president as being one of listening more than talking. Right? So I'm really not interested necessarily in foisting my opinion on anybody or anything, but listening to those constituencies. So I think one thing that Bill is thinking about working on, or will be working on next year, is to enhance the communication lines within the Senate by updating the web page, by updating the blogging capabilities of the Senate. And this gives us an opportunity to interact with a lot more people offline. Obviously, these agendas are very packed. We don't necessarily have a lot of time as senators to sit down and talk with other senators. And so this would give us a forum for that sort of communication so that anybody who is really up to date and participating in this forum would be able to hear those voices and transfer them to what other sorts of meetings or people that they're talking to. So I think that this is something that Bill is working on, but I certainly support that. And it's something I have a little bit of experience in terms of organizing communications.
Chris, thanks for sharing your thoughts with us. My question regards purview, Senate purview. You mentioned it briefly, and I appreciate that. You mentioned the budget. If it has impact on the academic unit's budget, then it's an academic matter. I wonder what other decision-making factors would come into play, or how you would make determinations of what is and is not the purview of the Senate, in addition to budget considerations. Are there other factors that would inform your decisions?
Absolutely. I think it's important to realize that the matters that the Senate are supposed to concentrate on, at least in terms of legislation, is academic matters as commonly understood. Right? So that means understood not by Johnson Hall. It means understood by us, right, in this room, and indeed the entire university community. So I think it's not unreasonable to ask people, is this an academic matter, right? So this budget thing has happened, or this decision has been made. It impacts this academic unit in this way. Is it academic? Is it something that the Senate should take up? I personally would like to have some sort of, I've said this before, and maybe I shouldn't say it out loud, but I'm going to, some sort of poll of the academic community at the university where we decide as a community what sorts of things we decide are academic, right? So if we ask everybody and everybody participates, right, we will have a list that says, okay, these things are academic and these things aren't. This might be a thorn in Johnson Hall's side. I'm okay with that. I'm happy to be a thorn. Though it might also be good for Johnson Hall in some ways. We might finally, or at least for some period of time, decide amongst ourselves that athletics is not academics, right? We may not decide that. I don't know how people would poll on that issue. However, it's something that we as a body get to decide, and I think somehow polling, open discussion, right, communication is going to be the way that we decide what is academic and what is not, and what should fall under the purview of the Senate and what, frankly, should not.
Thank you, Chris, for coming and speaking today. So I don't know if everyone knew this, but Chris was the committee chair of the University Library Committee during the records release situation. So Chris does actually have experience dealing with tense situations between administration and the academic side. I was on the committee, and I think you did an amazing job, but I was wondering if you could talk about what that situation taught you about shared governance.
Thank you. This is a good discussion to have. That was it was a very difficult thing. I was on the library committee. It was my second year. I agreed, sure, I'll be the chair of the library committee. How hard can that be, right? And then Bill did something and managed to anger some people, and those meetings became very tense. What it taught me is that there is room to push back against the administration when the administration is doing something that at least I viewed as either immoral or at best amoral. Right? That we as faculty do have a voice, that we can ask questions. Unfortunately, we can't always get answers, but we can ask those questions, and we can try to make space in the meetings to make sure that everybody who's at the table understands, first of all, what went down, what happened, and can leave understanding why the other person in the room did the thing that they did. It was a learning experience. It was very tense, as you said. But I'm glad it happened. And, you know, I also got to spend a lot of time with our excellent Dean of Libraries, Adrian Lim. And we've had a lot of discussions, and I think that in the end, it was a good thing. Well, maybe not for Bill, but it was a good thing for me. Thank you.
And we'll finish up with Professor West.
I'd like to ask a question about some of the things you were talking about classes and curriculum. So in the current structure, the oversight of the curriculum and the functioning of classes is done by the Senate committees and councils, which we've just seen the appointments and elections go by, and those people are not represented on the Senate. I'm only here because I'm chair of Academic Council, not because I am chair of the Committee on Courses. And I also teach a class of 500 students. So when you say you want to work on these issues, are you talking about working with those committees to bring them through the Senate? How do you see that interaction happening in terms of when you're dealing with curricular changes and curricular reform?
Absolutely. I see that the primary lift there will be done by committees. As a matter of fact, I would like, ideally, in an ideal universe, I would like to see a lot of the legislation that is essentially considered on the floor brought up on the floor of the Senate much earlier, so then the committees who will ultimately be writing the legislation can listen to the concerns of the senators before just presenting something on the floor that comes up for a vote. Of course, this does happen to some extent, but I really see that the heavy lift for curriculum, or really most issues, should be done by the committee, and I think that we should trust those committees more. When the committee says, we have thought long and hard about this issue, and this is what we think the legislation should look like, I really think that in most instances we should not turn around and try to rewrite that legislation on the Senate floor. Certainly not in real time. I think it's reasonable for that material to come to the Senate to have a discussion, and then go back to that committee. Of course, that's completely reasonable, but I don't think that we should have any kind of last-minute changes on the Senate floor that change the will of the committee that has been putting in all of the hours. So that's my view, is let's use these committees wisely and effectively, and then this room should be, I don't want to say only ratifying their decisions, but largely ratifying their decisions or providing input back to the committee so that they can make necessary changes so that the next iteration will be ratified. Yeah.
Professor Bartram.
Thanks, Randy. Actually, I had to put my few notes down because I know that otherwise will go off on tangents. So the full background of myself is in the statement available online, but I just want to do a few highlights about myself to get you sort of a sense of where I'm coming from. I've been at the U of O since 2001, a full professor in the Department of Planning, Public Policy, and Management. A lot of people know it as 3 p.m., which is not a time of the day. It's actually a department. A few key things about my background. My area of research is actually around collaborative governance. Most of it has been focused on natural resources, metropolitan planning, those kind of contexts. I have not done any research on university senates or its roles in the universities, although it does interesting opportunity to look at the circumstances. But my research really focuses on collaboration processes and structures and how they work in those environments, how you get different jurisdictions to work across different boundaries, how you get nonprofit, government, other stakeholders to work collaboratively in a decision-making environment, sometimes very tense and complex environments. So I have a professional interest as well as a personal interest in this position. I've been on the U of O Senate since 2012, I think. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about that. And then also served in the Senate Executive since 2013. So I've also served under Margie Paris, Robert Keir, and Randy Sullivan, and I found that a very helpful process for seeing different leadership styles, also learning a tremendous amount about the university and its committees and how it operates, and also learning about how much I don't know about those committees and processes and how they operate. I feel like every meeting there's a new committee that I've learned about that does something that I didn't realize was going on. But I think it's really giving me a sense of kind of the activities and things that go on across this university. So why am I running? First of all, I have to admit that I had lots of hesitation about running. I was asked by several people to run, and my first answer was no. But as I thought about it longer, I thought that there were a number of reasons why I didn't want to make that commitment. One is I think it's important for us to have choices. I think it's great that we've got 2 candidates for this office, and I hope we can continue having choices as we move forward. I think that's important for competition for this position. One big reason, though, is I really care about this university, and I think this is really a critical time in this university. We are seeing a lot of change happening, a lot of change in the administration, new policies coming on board, and as a Senate, we need to be engaged in those things. We need to really be able to focus time and attention on those efforts and really make a concerted effort to be involved in that decision-making. And I think that's really a really important time for that reason. And also, as you might guess, I want to see increased collaboration. I mean collaboration both within the Senate as a body, but also with its committees and with the administration and with the board. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to increase that collaboration. How? I think, as again, this is sort of this delay. It's a little bit strange to talk about what you're going to do as president because it's sort of 2 years off. But I think there is sort of a short term and a long term. I think one is obviously working to support the role of the president, and I've worked with Senator Harbaugh for several years in the Senate Executive. We don't always agree on all the policy outcomes, but we've had good interactions with that, and I think some of the changes that I've been hearing him talking about are also very positive in terms of increasing communication across campus. I think the vice president work also on committees is tremendously important. And again, we've seen a very long list and slate of committees across the university being nominated and put forward. But I think we need to continue to see more committee participation and really try and get more people engaged from across the university in those efforts. And I think part of that also means rewarding people more for their role and activities on Senate, particularly some of these committees that require substantial time and energy and effort. And I'd like to see us give more credit for service in terms of all the things that we're doing in terms of evaluations of positions. I also like to see more support for committees from the administration when that support really helps that committee move along effectively, and hopefully more credit for that committee work when it's really crucial to the functioning of the university. As the Senate president, if I'm so elected, my approach to it would really be as a facilitator and a process person. That's a lot of my early training was in facilitation and group process. And I view this role as really helping this body and its committees and structures work effectively. I will admit that I am not a big fan of Robert's Rules of Order. I think it is appropriate in certain circumstances, especially with legislative matters, and I've learned a lot from those processes. But I think there's also a lot of opportunities where we are in the process of reviewing, vetting, putting forward ideas when we can perhaps be unencumbered from the structures of Robert Rules and perhaps be more effective in that kind of forum. I think that it's also really about helping the Senate be important to everyone at this university. I think there's been some great examples in this past year or two where the Senate has really served as a campus forum for communication of issues, concerns, and I would like to see more of those opportunities for people to see the Senate as a place to really go and be heard, have things aired, and have things presented, and I would like to see even more of that role for some of these critical issues that we're playing today. And I think part of that whole thing is also setting up clearer processes and structures. Certainly, the committees we do tremendous amount of work. We also need to make sure that what happens at those committees is coordinated with each other and that there's a regular flow of information up to the Senate and back so we don't get these sort of surprises or last-minute changes going on. There's a lot of that vetting is happening before that process, before that final stage, and hopefully we can then focus on the really key issues and debates and not have time to spend time editing on the floor of the Senate. And finally, I think the other thing I would say is one of the things that's important is we've got a tremendous number of issues that need to be addressed. And one of our most valuable resources is time, and we have limited time to address all these issues. I think many of the issues that Chris put forward are really critical ones. There's many more that I could think of as well, but I would like to partly spend time with this body thinking about what are the priorities that we have going forward. What are the priorities coming up from the committees? What are the priorities of this organization? What are the priorities of the administration? And really trying to set out an agenda for the coming year to think about how do we want to use our precious time? How do we want to allocate it most effectively and most efficiently? Because we do have so many issues that are important and coming forward that we have to deal with, but limited time to really discuss them effectively. So thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to take questions. Yeah, Bill.
So I want to thank you for running, Rich. Yeah. There are a couple of things I'm concerned about. One is your current role as the 3 p.m. department head. Yep. My department is in the process of looking for a new head, and I, realized that I could not be a candidate for that given my Senate responsibilities. In part just in terms of time commitment, but also there's sort of the potential for conflict of interest between the goals of a particular department and the overall university issues. And I can think of things like course approvals and policies and so forth, also budgetary things. So I would appreciate it if you could say something about that. Sure. Then the other thing that I'm a little, maybe you can address is you really haven't done much committee service. In fact, I think just that Senate exec. And so maybe you could say something about how you would propose to get up to speed on the work.
Sure. In the first one, certainly being department head is one big hesitation I had with even running this, mainly because of the time commitment involved in it. And so one of the things that I've actually talked with some colleagues is what things would I let go. One of the issues is we're a fairly young department. We only have 2 full professors in our department. One of them is deeply engaged in the Sustainable Cities Initiative, and so there's really not an opportunity to pass that position on to somebody else at this time. I've had 2 sabbaticals while I was department head. I tried to give it away each time, and then they gave it back to me. But yes, I think one critical thing is I'm also director of one of our graduate programs, and I've already said that one of the things I would be giving up is turning over that graduate program coordination to somebody else. We do have people that can take on that role at this point. I'm also associate editor for a journal. I've already spoken to the other editors and said this might be something I'd have to give up in the future. So certainly I think those would be things that I have to give up in terms of time-wise. To be honest, I think the thing that will suffer the most is research. I think that's what's going to probably go on hiatus for a little while. In terms of conflicts of interest, I think that there certainly is opportunity for any time you're on a committee or any kind of position of conflicts of interest. If it's a direct conflict of interest, I certainly would want to recuse myself from decisions involving our department. But also I view this role in terms of Senate President, a lot of it is helping this body make its decisions. In many cases, I'll probably have more influence on the floor in terms of what I might comment on in a piece of legislation or in my vote than up here as chair trying to manage that process. The other question, in terms of service, I've not had much in the way of university service. A lot of my service has been focused at the school level. Also, as department head, I also serve on the department head's leadership, the school's leadership committee, and other duties. So, I have shied away from other universities just because of time availability. And so, I guess in terms of that learning process, that is a daunting part of this position for me, is understanding that the number of committees that operate, how they function. I think so part of that time will be spent both in that vice president role and president role, going around and understanding what those different committees are, who the chairs are, how they work and how they operate, and perhaps maybe taking a fresh eye at some of those committees because I've not been directly involved in them.
Now for our home viewing audience, I will now open up the floor for questions to both of the candidates. Seeing none, I'd like to give the It's all right.
I'd like to hear from both Rich and Chris, and thank you both for stepping up to this candidacy and considering this position. So I'd like to hear from both of you. I think Chris kind of spoke to it a little bit, but I was going to ask you, but ended too quickly there, Rich. This distinction between, I guess what I'm getting at here is the role of the resolution. And the Senate, of course, and the Constitution provides for the use of the resolution as a mechanism to facilitate a focal point for discussion, for vetting issues on the campus, for, as you said, also for having, sort of public airing of concerns on the campus. And the scope of what resolutions can be is not restricted in the Constitution. Of course, the legislation policy issues can be. So I'd like to just hear your thoughts on the role of the resolution as a mechanism to facilitate kind of public conversation within this body.
And let's start with Senator Marjoram.
I guess a couple of responses to that. I think if we're talking, one is the issue of going back to time and the time that we have available. So if we're spending a lot of time on resolutions and we're not having time on legislation, I think that's a concern. I think when I was speaking about this as a public forum for communication, I was thinking about the debate around sexual assault and awareness of the issues, even the responsible reporting policy. This is a forum for discussion around those policy issues. I think that is, the Senate has served a very important role in that and can continue to play a maybe increasing role in that. On the resolution side, I'm a little bit more, hesitant, and I actually liked Chris's idea of separating out this legislative from the more resolution side of things, not because I don't think that there are important things to comment on, but because I would hate for that to consume so much time we don't get to spend as much time as we need to on some of these really critical policy issues and legislative issues.
So thinking about resolutions versus legislation, one thing struck me maybe about a month ago. Randy had talked about the promotion of something akin to the City Club of Eugene, which I think he was calling the University Club.
Or Campus Club.
Campus Club, okay. And I really like this idea because I think that it's extremely important to provide a forum for everybody on campus to be able to share their experiences or to raise concerns. I think that one thing that we are doing as a campus is we are asking for excellence. And asking for excellence really means asking people to invest a great deal of time and energy, a great deal of their life not just for the university, but certainly in service of the university and in service of whatever their discipline is. However, we have to then, if people are going to dedicate so much of their life in service of the university and their discipline, I think it's important that we provide a way for those people to have an emotional response to decisions at the university level which have affected them. Right? I think that it's only reasonable if we're going to ask of so much of their time that we give something back, and that thing can be a forum and the ability for us to say, this is our ethical opinion as a body as to what is happening, whether that's happening on campus or someplace broader. So I really think that resolutions are extremely important. However, as I mentioned earlier, these discussions generally are more emotional, and I think it is a good idea to separate them, or in time perhaps, so that in some venues we are discussing these things, and in other venues we are discussing legislation. Just to keep the emotional away from the logical.
Thank you. Senators, are we ready to move to the election? So there is nothing in Robert's Rules of Order that requires the candidates to leave the room. Politically, I recommend that you do. It is not always a good thing to know who voted against you. Are we ready to move to the election? All in favor of Professor Chris Sinclair, please raise your placards and hold them high for a count. All in favor of Professor Rich Marjoram, please raise your placards. The chair will announce the results after the candidates have re-entered the room. Can someone fetch the candidates, please? The Senate President-elect and Vice President for the 2016-17 academic year is Chris Sinclair. And thank you, Professor Marjoram. Don't give back that. Don't give up that editing job yet. We may have work for you. No good deed goes unpunished. Now, the President, Michael Schill, would like to give some year-end remarks.
Thank you, Randy. I'd like to thank you, Randy, for all the hard work that you've poured into your work as Senate President this year. It is standing up here and running the Senate meetings isn't an easy job, and you have displayed enormous grace, integrity, and a really sincere and open heart, and we're all very grateful to you, so thank you very much. Now, I plan on making only very brief comments today. Over the past couple weeks, I've spent quite a bit of time working on my investiture speech, which is for next Wednesday, and it's too long. I've cut it back, but it's still way too long. And just in case I'm unable to cut it back sufficiently, I don't want to tire you out in advance of the investiture, or give any good stuff that's in there, or other stuff. But it's now been over a year since I first came before the Senate as a newly designated president. And in that talk, I said that I believed in shared governance and looked forward to working with you this year. I mentioned that we had much work to do and that I needed your help in doing that work. So a year has gone by, and I remain very optimistic. We've had a very good year in hiring faculty and expanded our diversity in the process. The numbers aren't in yet, but when the dust clears, we're hopeful that we will have added about 20 new tenure-related faculty members to our university. We also have hired 3 terrific deans and an excellent vice president for research and innovation. On the academic side, and certainly in my office, we've hired, as all of you know, a number of administrators who are really terrific and who are really working very hard on behalf of the university. This year, we admitted an additional 60 net new graduate students to the university, changing a very troubling pattern for our university of decline in our graduate program. In addition, this year's graduate program is more diverse than has been our past, so I'm pleased about that. We also recently identified ways to save $3.1 million in recurring administrative costs, which we're investing in faculty, hiring, IT, and other needed investments. The process wasn't easy. It sometimes entailed human cost, but it was necessary. In addition, recently, we've hired a new AVP for student success and made a $17 million investment in scholarships, advising, graduate assistance, and predictive analytics for our students. Our goal is to increase our graduation rate by 10 percentage points. This morning, I had the privilege of being at an award ceremony. Yesterday, I had the privilege of being at a faculty award ceremony. This morning, I was at an award ceremony for advisors, and it was really, the things I heard at both of those meetings were incredibly exciting and impressive. Our faculty are doing tremendous research, incredible teaching, really fabulous mentorship. And some of the folks who are doing advising are faculty members, talking about this morning now, but just a tremendous number of people are probably toiling away, and you don't know their faces or names. But they're advising our students. They're helping our students make their curricular choices. And in some instances, they're keeping them alive. And it's really, we don't fully, I think, as a group, I know I didn't when I was a faculty member. I don't want to speak for you. I did not appreciate those people and what they were doing. But I want you to know they're out there and they're doing really wonderful jobs. We created a much better Title IX investigatory and accountability system for the university. We're still working on it, but we are committed to ensuring that our students are as safe as they can be and that we are as responsive to the needs of our students as we can possibly be. One of the things that we are trying to reduce is the tendency, as we saw in our climate surveys, both of them, that people didn't feel that they could bring their complaints to the university and they would get appropriate handling. And so we hopefully have made tremendous, I could tell you on the ground, we've made the changes to change, we've made the administrative changes to change that. In terms of the students' perception, I think we're also making major progress. We also successfully completed over the course of the year contracts with the SEIU and United Academics, and I'd say we did that with minimal friction, and so I'm very pleased with that. We also finalized a strategic framework for the university, which had been long in coming, but completed with the help of just legions of faculty members. And as of later this week, we'll finalize the ideal plan. It's up for comment on the website. That plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion will then become a sister document to the strategic framework. We're also on track to going past the halfway mark in our campaign. We expect to hit $1 billion either later this month or sometime next month, and we're very excited about that. That will help pay for some of the investments that we are making. And I think with your help, we've also improved the tone and reduced some of the tension that has existed in the past between Johnson Hall and the Senate, and I hope to continue that process in the future. And now, so those are the good things. And you know, some of these next ones are going to be good things too, but they're challenges for the future. So here's what I see ahead of us in the coming year. Just a few things that are ahead of us. I'm sure one thing that I've learned about this job is when I wake up in the morning and think I know what's ahead of me during the day, I'm never correct. There's always a million more things that are there to challenge me. It's one of the things that makes me love the job and be excited about it. So here's a few of the challenges as I see them. First, we must continue, and this is an old story, but it's perhaps never more true. We must continue to look for the resources we need to continue to increase our faculty ranks, to promote research, to enhance our student success, and to further diversity and inclusion on campus. This is going to be doubly challenging. I was in Salem this week. We are looking at a state budget deficit of $1.1, $1.2 billion. If the past is prologue, what that means is we will be last in line, which means we will likely be seeing a very tough environment for the budget. And when I say a very tough environment, I don't mean that we're not going to get a big growth in the money that we get, right? At best, we would get a modest growth. That's what we had this year. But in a more realistic setting, we are doing plans for reductions by the state. We're trying to fight them, but it is in some ways baked into the system right now, and we'll have to see. There are some possibilities in the state for additional resources that a number of people are talking about, but we have to look at what the budget is going to be like, and next year promises to be a very, very challenging year, and a challenge at the state level, as I said, is a challenge that gets translated right down to us. So these additional resources, the resources that I mentioned a moment ago that we are going to be looking for, are going to be in the areas of philanthropy, tuition, and also additional efforts to align our expenditures with our needs. And that's why, Gina, when we were at the session, you said, are we at an end? No, we're not at an end. We're never going to be at an end, right? Partly because we shouldn't be at an end, but partly because the state will put us in a position where we can't be at the end. Any responsible administrator needs every year to be thinking about where resources are spent, where they're needed, and how can we expend our resources most wisely. Even if we were in good times, we should be doing that, especially when we're in the good times. But now we know that we are not always in good times. This university has been through probably more years of budgetary difficulties than in good years, and so we will be continuing with our efforts to realign our expenditures with our needs. We also need to build modern facilities to support our scientific enterprise. This is very, very expensive. We'll be looking to philanthropy from this. We'll be looking to the state for support on this. But if we don't, we'll be unable to hire faculty in these areas. And speaking of graduate students, I mentioned before that we were successful this year in recruiting an additional 60 net new graduate students to our campus. We need to complete a contract with our GTRs and our GTFs without the acrimony that was exhibited last year. These young men and women are our students, and we want them to succeed. So we can't allow what happened last year to happen again this year. We also need to redouble our efforts to keep our students safe. One area of focus that you've heard about that we're really very engaged in is fraternities and sororities. And that is fraternities and sororities in Eugene as well as in Shasta Lake. We need to continue to work hard at achieving greater diversity, equity, and inclusion on campus. We'll have much work to do to meet the legitimate requests of the Black Student Task Force. And we have, as all of you know, we have 13 working groups. We've moved forward on probably about half of their requests. We have additional ones that we are going to be moving forward with, but that is going to consume a lot of energy and potentially a lot of resources. And then we also have other groups on campus, right? It's not just about our Black students. So we have work to do. We have challenges in that area. Speaking of equity, our recent experience with hiring our deans demonstrates that we also have work to do with regard to gender equity on campus. We must work on our campus. We must work on our campus climate and find ways to promote women to leadership roles. And I meant that "and" to be a real "and." Those are two separate issues. They're related, but they're two separate issues. We need to make sure this campus is a campus that is friendly, that is supportive to our women faculty, our women students, and our women staff members. And what we need to do is separately to make sure that we are promoting women, that we are moving women into positions where they can become leaders one day of this campus. And we have some, but not enough. And as we just found out in our deanship decisions, it doesn't happen by accident. You have to be intentional about this. And as we enter year 3 of our new university governance system, we must work together to both stay in our own lanes and where we are in the same lanes to ride and drive cooperatively and in the same direction. That won't always be easy, but it will be very important for us to succeed as a university. So while I'm ready for this summer and I'm ready for commencement coming up, I also look forward to next fall and the chance to work together to further the mission of the university and to work with all of you and deepen our relationship and make great progress. And I'm looking forward to working with Bill and Chris and working with all of you. Thank you. And thank you. So Randy, come on up. So I already did my speech thanking you, but you know, as I said, we owe you a tremendous debt of gratitude, no matter how many editing issues you got into up here over the course of, or how many difficult parliamentary issues. You never stop smiling. You never stop being open. You never stop being helpful. And I think everybody who knows you knows that deep down, all you care about is the betterment of the university, our students, and our faculty. So I just want to give you a small token and thank you all. Thank you so much for everything you've done.
Thank you so much. Periodic table wrapping paper. Does he know me or what? I get to open this, right? Yes. Oh, okay. I know. I want to keep the paper. Oh. But there's time pressure. Oh. Where do you find periodic table wrapping paper? more. You guys are ready to stay after 5 anyway, right? Yeah, right. Hey, Bill, it's your book. What do we got? What do we got? All right, it's one of those trick things you keep unwrapping and unwrapping. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. A gavel of my very own. Yes. You're so going to regret this for the rest of the meeting. I guess you got tired of me banging on this thing. They're like, save the furniture. Thank you so much. That's I'm going to overuse that thing now. Chocolate in here too? Well, okay. I'll
work with the chemistry demonstration exercises?
Sure. I'm going to take this home. Use it to dinner. Dessert. Okay, here, you can have this one back. Oh, I guess I'll have to use that later. Yeah. I lost my agenda. Oh, the next thing up. We're almost on schedule. Oh, thank you. Next up is we're ready for awards, my favorite thing. The UO Senate Award for Shared Governance, Transparency, and Trust. It will be introduced by me. The UO Senate Shared Governance, Transparency, and Trust Award was created on January 21st, 2015. It represents the Senate's interest in encouraging the proliferation of trust, transparency, and shared governance with the university administration. This award is presented annually to the individual who has best exemplified the values of trust, transparency, and shared governance in the past year. The Senate Executive Committee collected and screened the nominees and recommended this year's recipient to the University Senate. The Senate has confirmed the Executive Committee's choice. I am pleased to announce that the winner of the UO Senate Shared Governance, Transparency, and Trust Award for the 2015-2016 academic year is William T. Harbaugh, President-elect of the University Senate and Professor of Economics. Wait, I got to finish my speech. Oh, yeah, come on up. Come on up. Yeah, you stand here while I say stuff about you. During the past year, while he has served as Senate Vice President, Bill has been a tireless advocate for full faculty and Senate participation in governance, most particularly as it affects the core academic mission of the university. He has worked for enhanced participation of representative faculty on the hiring committees of academic administrators, and to ensure that the Senate Budget Committee will play a meaningful role as the university considers adapting the budget model to changing conditions. Bill's dedication to transparency is legendary. Through numerous requests for public information, often through the formal public records request process and often at his own expense, he has provided the community with information that it needed to make informed decisions about their public university. The word trust frequently evokes a warm, fuzzy feeling, and I don't think anybody has ever accused Bill of being warm and fuzzy, except perhaps his wife. But there is an element of public trust that must at times be cold and hard, insisting upon competence and accountability in the administration and operation of our public institutions. Sharing a private trust with an individual will frequently win you friends. Advocating for the public trust is almost guaranteed to make some enemies. Throughout this year, and indeed as long as I have known him, Bill has been a champion of the public trust. Therefore, it is my distinct honor and particular pleasure to present the 2015-2016 University of Oregon Senate Shared Governance, Transparency, and Trust Award to Professor William T. Harbaugh.
there's a physical object. I'm not sure if professor was spelled correctly there, but so Randy, thank you very much for those. We'll talk later. Thank you very much for those comments, which I really appreciate you saying that, and I've really enjoyed working with you over the last couple of years on these things. I just want to say a little bit. I feel a little guilty about having first got the Senate to create this award back in 2014, and now I'm the second person to get it. Michael Dreiling got it last year, I think. And just in case that doesn't sound self-serving enough, I have to admit that the idea for this award came from my mother. Sort of. Actually, she had a different thing in mind. My mother was a lifetime member of the League of Women Voters and an advocate for the cause of good government. And so we talked a lot about what was going on in UO over the past years and so forth. And she suggested that I try to get the Senate to create an annual award, a Booby Prize award, to be given to the administrator who had done the least to promote trust, transparency, and shared governance. So it probably won't surprise some of you to know that my mother had an edge to her. So, but I'm a much nicer person, so I originally proposed that this award be given to the administrator who has done the most to create trust and transparency and promote shared governance. And I'm hoping that someday we'll find one. I think that things are looking up for this university, and I think most of you know my optimism about this. If you don't, this is me being optimistic. I'm very happy about the general path that the university is taking. That said, that there are some still some serious problems with transparency and so forth. I won't go into the details here because that's not what this award is about. That would be the other award that we didn't create. Thank you very much.
You hold it, I shake your hand. Yeah. Photo op. I still lost my script. Here we go. The next award is the UO Senate Classified Staff Leadership Award. This goes to Dorothy Atneve for campus planning, design, and construction. Dorothy was unable to be here today, but Theodora Coe-Thompson has come to say a few words on her behalf.
This is when we always adjust the mic. Dorothy Atneve is an accounts payable technician in campus planning, design, and construction, where she has worked for the past 10 years. She has been employed at the university as a classified worker for over 30 years and has worked in a variety of departments. Dorothy weaves herself in many roles. As a leader of the labor choir, she lends her creativity and passion to compose many of the songs she serves on the union's labor choir and serving on the union's hardship committee as well. Her leadership, service, and participation help not only to advance the issues she cares about, she always has a finger on the pulse of diversity events throughout campus, and she serves as a primary networker between different university departments. Her eagerness to offer support and encouragement to all who know her, and her helping to create outreach opportunities for community events such as Take Back the Night, connects her with everyone and others with everyone in SEIU United Academics and the Graduate Teaching Fellows Federation. We classified senators are proud to present this Classified Staff Leadership Award to Dorothy Atneve for being an agent of change and leading by example. Unfortunately, Dorothy cannot be here today. She is attending to family matters and visiting family back in Tennessee. However, as you know, I'd like to be asking the Senate's indulgence to spare some minutes in the fall agenda for her to personally receive the Senate Award herself and for the photo op. Dorothy is someone who's always prepared, though, at every eventuality. So she has arranged for the labor choir and her colleagues in campus ops to come forward and present a song to the Senate. So Louis Shige and the choir are here to, who are really excited that she's getting this award.
So here are some words that Dorothy emailed me to say to you today. To the University Senate and my coworkers here today, I wish I could be there in person to thank you from my heart for this award. In my current job, I verify and pay bills for everything from large construction projects to small building repairs. It takes the hard work and long-time experience of a lot of staff to keep the university running smoothly. Most of what we do is by its nature ephemeral and has to be done again and again. It's important to remember, whether we're at the top of the org chart or the bottom, that it's our efforts combined that have the power to fix things when we see they need fixing, sometimes even with lasting effects. I thank the Labor Choir for coming to celebrate today by singing to you about that. This song is about labor history, was made for participation. You'll catch on to the pattern right away. We invite you to join in and sing with us if you would like.
Who got American workers' contracts? Workers' contracts, workers' contracts. Who got American workers' contracts? The working folks on strike. Who got Americans medical leave? Medical leave, medical leave. Who got Americans medical leave? The working folks on strike. It didn't come from the boss's charity. It didn't come from the New York Times. It came from the power of the working folks who walked those picket lines. Who got Americans a living wage? A living wage, a living wage. Who got Americans a living wage? The working folks on strike. Who got Americans parental leave? Parental leave, parental leave. Who got Americans parental leave? The working folks on strike. You can blog, you can talk, you can Twitter, you can email the liberal left. But if you're not willing to walk that line, talk is all you're gonna get. An injury to one is an injury to all. An injury to all. An injury to all. An injury to one is an injury to all. For the working folks on strike.
That was awesome. We don't normally have that much fun in these meetings. And let's see. And so my last meeting, you're going to be on time. We're actually exactly on time. I can't believe it. Okay. So the next one is the UO Senate Wayne Westling Award for, and Bill Harbaugh is here to present that.
So the Westling Award is given for university leadership and service. It was created by the Senate. I think it's our oldest award. It was created back in 2001, and it's named in honor of Wayne Westling, who is a professor of law for 22 years at the university and was recognized across campus for his unswerving and selfless commitment to faculty governance. So it's given to the faculty or staff member for their outstanding and long-term leadership and service to the university. The Senate Committee on Committees had many nominations for this award, and after deliberation, we unanimously agreed that we should give it to Rob Keir. So, Rob, if you could come up and sing something for us. So, this is the nomination. Rob has served continuously as a senator or Senate officer from 2009 to the present. He was the Senate president for 3 of those years. During this time, U of O has had 6 university presidents, 6 permutations of provosts, 2 very different governing boards, and has survived a series of tumultuous events. Rob has dealt with all this chaos with equanimity and a determined perseverance to see the university through to better times. His work stands as a demonstration of the necessity for shared governance. Rob's first term as Senate president started with a bang when in November 2011, the Oregon University system fired University of Oregon President Richard LaRiviere. Keir helped orchestrate the faculty response, including the protests at the board's infamous November 28th meeting in Portland. He organized the meeting between the OSU chancellor and the faculty assembly and the university community in Mack Court, where he gave both sides a chance to speak their minds. Those meetings were just the public part of Rob's work. Behind the scenes, he and other faculty leaders had been negotiating a new UO constitution, and in December, Rob led another faculty assembly meeting to approve it. President LaRiviere signed it as his last act before leaving Eugene. It is still in effect as the foundation of UO's shared governance system. I'll only mention a few of the other events in which Professor Keir has effectively used shared governance to serve the university, always in cooperation with other faculty and Senate constituents. In the spring of 2014, Rob led the Senate in a series of cathartic public meetings about campus sexual violence, which helped UO confront the reality of it and start the process of working to limit it and its effects on our students. In the fall of 2014, after failed negotiations between the Graduate Student Union and the administration led to a strike, Rob's work with the Senate and the administration helped clarify the chaos about how to issue grades. In early 2015, after UO's new Board of Trustees attempted to take away substantial parts of faculty's control over academic matters, Rob worked to help the board understand the issues and convince it to adopt a position that acknowledged the faculty's role. In the spring of that year, he was part of the Senate group that persuaded a very reluctant President Gottfredson to sign what is perhaps the country's strongest academic freedom policy. Through all this, Rob has had a remarkable academic and artistic career. He earned his PhD from Yale in 1989. He's been teaching at UO since 1990. He's composed a wide variety of musical works, from symphonies to choral pieces. He's received a long string of commissions and prestigious awards. Most recently, in April, he got an award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters in New York City. He runs the Oregon Bach Festival's annual Composer Symposium, and in the fall, the Eugene Symphony will perform a work that was composed by UO and high school students that he's been mentoring. So Professor Keir continues to work to support shared governance. As incoming president of the Oregon Interinstitutional Faculty Senate, he's president of the Pac-12 Academic Leadership Conference, and as the immediate UO Senate past president, although not anymore because now that's Randy.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your kindness in offering the Wayne Westling Award for University Leadership and Service to me. I'm humbled in being selected for this award when so many others are equally or more deserving. As I look around the room, I see so many people who were with us, certainly before President LaRiviere was fired, but ever more so after that chilling act really changed our future. It's no understatement to say that all of us have been through an unparalleled trial by fire over the past 5 long, long years, We are not the same university that we were prior to the firing of Richard Lariviere, which was an event that forced us onto a path that has tested us again and again. And even this past week, we were sorely tested when the Senate considered its latest version, or should I say versions, of the responsible employee policy, also known as the Policy on UO Responsible Employee Duty to Report Sexual Harassment and Sexual Assault. We did not turn away from our obligation to consider this policy in detail and to engage in meaningful and respectful dialogue, which is particularly challenging when discussing controversial issues that we care about so deeply. Taking the long view, it is obvious that we are still in the middle of a long, challenging journey, the end of which we cannot ascertain. And it is clear to me that through this journey, all of us are being tested to demonstrate our commitment to the core values of the Wayne Westling Award, those being, and I quote, commitment to the principles of shared governance, commitment to participatory decision-making, and commitment to fostering a campus climate of inclusiveness and respect. We've just heard about that from our university president who articulated these same values. In light of the principles that shaped Wayne Westling's life of service, it behooves us to take just a few minutes to reflect on where we find ourselves today and where we need to go from here. And I won't be very lengthy about this, so don't worry. When the now defunct State Board of Higher Education fired President Richard Lariviere, it triggered a series of events that changed our university forever. And a host of other life-changing decisions and legislative initiatives quickly followed. The decision of Richard Lariviere to sign both the university constitution and policy on policies prior to leaving office. Then the decision of the faculty to unionize. Then the decision of the state legislature to allow our university to have its own board of trustees, a so-called independent governing board. And all the while, extensive shifts and changes in the administrative leadership of the university at all levels. And finally, the decision to undertake an extensive and exhaustive realignment of university policies that is regulated in part by our revised policy on policies. As an eternal optimist, I see all of these changes and challenges as an incredible gift to us. Through whatever indefinable workings of fate, we have been offered a series of remarkable opportunities to co-create our institution in ways that promise to be visionary and transformative. As an aside, our president-elect, Chris Sinclair, had this gesture that I notice as a musician about all of us. He kept talking about our university. He referred to we. It's so important that we stay focused on this sense in which we are all together in this endeavor. As I've often said, the Senate and its committee structure, which provides over 15,800 hours of service per year, is the engine of the university. The Senate is not some random collection of constituencies. We are an ever-evolving community, a family, that faces all of the challenges that come with being a single body of individuals devoted to the work of attaining the highest good for all concerned. In our common striving and seeking, we embody the spirit of change, the spirit of transformation, and the spirit of that measure of devotion which is essential to reaching for the truth, for greater understanding, and for self-determination. It is self-determination that is at the heart of our journey, even more today than in the past. In order to fully determine our own future, we must continually renew our commitment to the three Westling principles: commitment to shared governance, commitment to participatory decision-making, and commitment to fostering a campus climate of inclusiveness and respect. Whenever we participate in decision-making, we must take into account the impact of our actions on the lives of those who will be affected most deeply. We must never lose sight of the human cost of any decision that we make, especially in our deliberations and actions as a legislative body. If we maintain our focus on the three Westling principles, we will continually reinvigorate our will to co-create this university that we love so very deeply. This university that we proudly call our university because it truly belongs to all of us, students, faculty, officers of administration, officers of research, classified staff, and administrators. And it's important for us to remember that as well. We're all in the circle of this co-creation. And no matter what happens, no matter what turns or twists we have in our path going forward, we must honor each other and work together at the deepest level of who we are. Moreover, I am grateful to President Schill for his vision of the University of Oregon as a vibrant institution that is focused on achieving and sustaining academic excellence through research, teaching, and service. Thank you again for your kindness in offering the Wayne Westling Award to me. But in truth, given the very special circumstances of our 5-year history, it belongs to all of those who continue to uphold these principles. By this, I mean everyone in this body that represents the entire university, and in particular, I mean everyone here today, all of you, and everyone who has served in the Senate since the fall of 2011. Certainly, this award belongs to you as much as it does to me. In accepting this award today, my deepest thanks goes to all of you for your service, which has sustained our university through the most challenging times that we've ever known, and is needed now more than ever as we strive to achieve even greater goals. With my deepest gratitude, I thank each one of you for your devotion to working together to create the best university that we can be. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And I want to give my special thanks to Rob for being such a mentor to me. I could not have done what I did as president without serving as vice president under his auspices and mentorship. So thank you. And now the last Senate award, the UO Senate Officer of Administration Leadership Award. This award will be presented by Senator Keith Frazee.
Thanks, Randy. So the award recipient of the for leadership and service for 2015-16 from the Senate for our Officer of Administration goes to Kimberly Johnson, Director of the Office of Academic Advising. Please welcome her to the front. So I'd like to say a moment first about academic advising. And I so appreciate the President's words at the beginning about academic advising. And I'd like to echo them because standing behind Kimberly are a lot of academic advisors on this campus, some of whom are professional advisors, some of whom are among your ranks as faculty members. They serve in faculty roles. And I am not an academic advisor. I work in enrollment management and work rather closely with our academic advisors. So I've been able to watch the incredible work that they do to synthesize and interpret the complexity of the University of Oregon degree for brand new students, some of whom are the first in their families to go to college. And the complexity is magnified. And they're the ones, the academic advisors are the ones who are able to explain the path ahead for them. Not only do they explain the path ahead for the academic degree, which is paramount, but they're often the first person that students will go to in need. First person that they will go to in a time of crisis, academic or not. And the academic advisors on this campus, they know you. You may not know them, but they know you and your departments, and they know every single department on this campus that can provide student support when they need it. And they're able to refer and defer those students that need support because they're often the first line. We owe an incredible amount of gratitude to the work of all of our academic advisors because they do some heavy lifting before students ever arrive in your classrooms. So on behalf of all academic advisors, can we just thank the work of our academic advisors? Now, Kimberly has done an incredible job in a leadership role for academic advising. I have watched as she has taken the Department of Academic Advising, one that's a centralized advising unit for many of our undeclared students and those that just need general advising. She's taken that department and really forged ahead and made some incredible path forward. But that's not why she's receiving this award, although her work in that position is meritorious and of distinction. It is because of her work outside of her professional capacity that she is receiving this award. So these are a few of the comments of the many folks that submitted Kimberly's name for this award. I will say that there are over 1,400 officers of administration on this campus. And Kimberly stood out among them for some of the following reasons. As chair of the President's Task Force on African American Student Retention, Kimberly pulled the very complex and varying needs and viewpoints of the committee into one shared vision and worked tirelessly, after hours, online and over the phone, to draft the final recommendations submitted to President Schill. She managed the relationships with the student representatives of the Black Student Task Force with great care and honored and respected their concerns and feelings the entire process. Kimberly expresses a deep interest and commitment to the U of O, to its students. It is clear to me that Kimberly has a strong desire to help the university progress, and she goes above and beyond her regular duties to do so. And Kimberly's support for the Black Student Task Force has demonstrated a strong care for students and for creating a university climate where all students can thrive. Please join me in congratulating Kimberly Johnson.
Thank you, Key. Thank you, UO Senate and guests today for the nomination for this award. I am sandwiched between 5 o'clock and your beverages, so I will try not to take too long, but I did want to take the time to really recognize the work that we do in advising and the community that's surrounded and the people that I work with closely every day. It was a particular special honor for me to receive this award based on, I'm working on many committees, but based on the committee that was focusing on addressing African American student retention and support for the advising and the student community, because it really was a microcosm of all of the complexities of the work on student success and access that I do on a daily basis for all of our students. So 15 years of experience that I've had in student success, access, retention, and advising. I've often had to explain the value of the importance in not only the work that we do, but the reasons behind it. Things like why students need guidance, the support, the information, the connection to campus, and a space for exploration and decision-making. I think that this challenge often stems from the nature of who works in higher ed. It's those of us who really have succeeded to be here. So it's often difficult to think about those students who don't or aren't managing their experiences in the way that maybe we remember when we were going through higher education, or maybe we were never aware of. I'm a U of O grad. I grew up in Eugene. I could easily take my experiences in building programs based on my own experience in the 1997 class cohort that entered, that graduated in 4 years. But that really would be forgetting the students who also entered in my class who weren't able to graduate, which was about 60% of the entering student body, and 70% of Black students. And looking at 6 years, 50% of those that just did not continue on at the U of O. So if I was to base my experience and the work that I do on my own story, I would fail. And I would neglect to recognize that there's needs that every student has as they're transitioning their experience as a student here at the University of Oregon. So those gaps inform the work that I do every day, because I question and I think about what are the gaps, what are we not meeting, who are the students that we don't see, who are the students who are not succeeding, who are not thriving. for that. And so that is sort of the core of, I think, the work that I do. I want to thank my family and extended family that are here, my husband Kevin and my in-laws Wilson and Peggy. Having this kind of job, you know that we work evenings and weekends, and without our family, we really can't do that. I want to thank my work family, where we strive to provide students more than a transaction, but a part of shaping a transformative experience with students. An office that for many years had to meet the needs of students, many times in moments of crisis, many times with limited staff. A group of people in my office who have grown to be a very cohesive team in the past year and a half, who are committed to developing the type of advising community and environment that students can thrive in. They welcome my pushing them daily to how we can work better, building collaborative relationships, developing big ideas, expanding our services, having a footprint across campus, and establishing a holistic advising relationship with our students. A special thank you to my Associate Director, Lori Manson. I cannot do the work that I do, serve on all the committees that I serve, if I didn't have her as a staple person in our team. And I also couldn't do it by learning every day from the team that I work and learn from and the discussions that we have. That's how you have high-achieving offices, is teams like that. One that is inspired and motivated to do better work today than they did the day before, and the next and the next. So thank you to Arturo, Tammy, Melina, Paige, Ted, Stephanie, Rebecca, Bill, Cynthia, Chris, Carla, Dulce, Megan, Tom, Tad, Jerry, Aaron, our peer advisors, and our student workers. I have to say all of their names. Thank you to my co-chair in the Retention and Completion Committee, a wonderful colleague, Grant Schoonover, who I've been able to help work together and thinking creatively about student success. Thank you to Vice Provost Lisa Frankel, who has hired me, thank you, who supported me and has given me room to develop the team and allow our expertise to take leadership in the work we do every day. Across all the committees that I serve on, thank you, within the UGS division, Residence Life, Orientations, the Dean of Students, CAS. This is a true partnership, and all of those that will be coming on board with SSC advising platform next year that will really help us launch supporting our support to students. But lastly, and most importantly, because I want to honor the reason why I was given this award, I want to think about how this incoming class of students, we shared with every single student a video that the U of O campaign made on what if. Just to take a moment from a slice of what the what if statement is. It begins, or part of it begins, if is about unrelenting desire to find out who we are, what makes the world tick, and how we can embrace our diversity and work together to solve problems, to make things in Oregon, America, the world better for everyone. If is the energy that fuels everything at the University of Oregon, drives discovery, and makes ducks ducks. I think the students that I work with on the Black Student Task Force might make their own version of this script, and so I think their version might be, if is a disruption of the status quo to make change in positive ways, to break out of routine and simple answers. If is the way we question the way things have always been, the idea of what kind of university we want this to be. What if we needed more? What if we dared to demand? So thank you to the entire Black Student Task Force for letting me be a part of finding solutions. It was stressful, it was tiring, it was challenging in many ways. Thank you to the leadership that was given through the Division of Equity and Inclusion and the President's Office, who took their demands with respect and recognition in putting together working groups to actually address their concerns. And a special thank you to a few, not all of the students, I didn't get a chance to know them all, but the few that I've grown to really admire. Denisa, Deja, Jaleel, Shanice, Diamante, Kenna, Ashley, and all the other students, all the staff and faculty who also made the time and effort to address these needs seriously, committing to not only now, but the future, and those that have always been working on these towards all of these goals, and the many who will be continuing to seek ways to provide an academic environment where all of our students can thrive. Thank you.
number of years ago, a past president came up with the idea of a dead president's society. As the deadest of the dead presidents, since it includes all those who were president of the new Senate, I have the honor of inducting Randy into the select group of the Dead President's Society. And a token.
Oh, this is great. The number of times I've looked over at Paul with the deer in the headlights look. What do I do now? Before I pass the gavel to my successor, I do want to give a few brief thanks. First of all, I want to thank the senators, all the senators. As I look back, I don't like laundry lists, so I'm not going to go back over our laundry list, but I invite you to look back over what we've done this year. And some of our best work was what we spent the least time on the floor with. I asked you to do homework, and you did it. And I asked you, if you have an issue with this, get in touch with the stakeholders, get it resolved before it comes to the Senate floor. You did that time and again. You reviewed things before they got there. So, I mean, I don't resent the times we did have to slog things out on the floor, but most of the time it was because there was a real issue that we had to slog out on the floor. And the other things sailed through because you guys did your homework. So give yourselves a hand. And a lot of what we're doing was on the policy turnover and with policies. And I want to give special thanks to Chuck Triplett. He took the time to meet with me almost weekly. We tried things and tried new ways of doing things, and it's like, wow, that didn't work. How are we going to do it differently? Backed up, tried again, and developed many techniques and ways of doing business that I think are going to persist and are a good way of getting things through. And I really appreciate you, Chuck. Thanks. And I know there's a million people I'm leaving off, but I also want to thank President Schill, always treating me like a colleague and interested in what I had to say, disagreeing with me when we wanted to disagree and butting heads when we needed to, and taking the time to meet frequently. Thank you so much. I always look forward to our meetings. Thank you. Vice President Harbaugh. I get to keep this one. Before I hand this to you, it's not a bottle of scotch. I have a present for you. It's a Koifel and Esser duplex trig decitrig log slide rule, so that you can figure out what's going on. Have fun. Very nice. And you get the gavel. Thank you.
So I want to also thank Kurt and Bettina for all their work this year. You did a fabulous job. And I just want to confess that I sat through most of this year's Senate meetings hoping that Randy would crash and burn so that I'd look comparatively good next year, or so I'd at least have something to blog about. But that didn't work, and so next year's I'm just going to have to work really hard to try to make things function as well as they functioned this year. So thank you very much, Randy, for everything you've done for us. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second? Any debate? All in favor of adjourning? We're adjourned.